When you're managing an HR department, you're often the bearer of bad news.
Rising costs, employee turnover, cultural complaints, key people not feeling appreciated, compliance concerns, and so much more.
It's time to change the conversation. It's time to deliver real results to your leadership team. It's time to think more broadly.
It's time you meet with Ellerbrock Norris.
Ellerbrock Norris will help you think differently about the benefits world and be your advocate to broader risk management across your organization.
After one meeting, your team will walk away knowing how one or two small changes can create amazing ripple effects across your entire company.
Set up your free risk consultation today at ellerbrock-norris.com.
My Staff connects the right people and the right companies. Fast, friendly, and focused on results. From temporary staffing to executive recruitment, the My Staff team knows Nebraska business and delivers a job done right. If you've got a big project coming up, don't stress your team. Call Virginia Frazee at My Staff. Omaha businesses trust Virginia to find the right temporary, permanent, and legal talent fast. For skilled corporate support that delivers results, call 402-614-1441. Whatever your hiring need or career move, My Staff is your employment partner for a job done right. Visit mystaff.com or call 402-614-1441. Because at My Staff, we're not just recruiters, we're partners in your success story.
To the generations we think we understand,
and the systems we rarely examine,
to expectations that are spoken,
and the ones that are assumed,
to the managers shaping daily experience.
and the organizations that support them.
Cheers to HR.
Cheers to HR.
HR Wine Bar is supported by the Human Resource Association of the Midlands and staffed by HR professionals who volunteer their time to strengthen the profession and the workplaces we serve. I'm Amy Luckenbill, president of HRAM and your host for HR Wine Bar.
And I'm Jennifer Tritz, joining Amy for today's conversation.
This episode is a lead-in to our September program on the multi-generational workforce. Generational conversations are happening everywhere right now, and they tend to start in the same place, discussing the differences, expectations, work styles. And today we're hoping to address it from a couple of different angles that might widen our view on the topic.
Absolutely. I think, instead of focusing on the generations themselves, we want to really look at the systems that they're operating in. Some of this general tension shows up as misalignment, inconsistency, and unclear expectations.
We're joined today by Tami Williams, who's going to help us unpack the situation. Tami, welcome.
Well, Amy and Jen, thanks so much for having me. I love talking about interpersonal relations in the workplace, and generation differences and similarities are all part of that story. So thanks for the invitation today.
Absolutely. Tami, first of all, thank you for joining us. We know you're really busy, and we know you're about ready to go on vacation to the mountains with the family. We were discussing
Thank you.
vacations before we started today. Can you start us out by sharing some information about your background? I mean, I know what Ed.D means as an acronym after names, but not everybody does, so I'm going to let you share that. And talk about how you got into this type of work and the work you're doing in the space now.
Yeah, for sure. So when I went to undergraduate, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. And so started in the classroom, and then in a very traditional way, went from the classroom to a pseudo-administrative role, to an administrator at the building level, to an administrator at the district level. And that kind of progression was just a very typical progression. And then to move from a executive leadership role into higher ed is also a pretty typical progression. Typical may not describe our current reality in 2026. And so in all of that, there's opportunities to consider how do we support the needs of developing our future leaders, our future principals, our future superintendents, And the work that we do here at UNO in educational leadership, through doctorates, masters, ed specialist, leadership work, parallels very nicely about what happens in the C-suite and through interpersonal interactions in the business world as well, and being able to set people up for success for a long career and being able to lead from the seat they're in. And so found myself at UNO about 10 years ago and have found a really nice niche between the practicing leadership and studying leadership from a research side.
Fantastic. As a, recovering public school teacher,
Yes.
everything that you just said speaks to me in volumes. So, Tammy, for your benefit and for the benefit of any of our new listeners, we wanna share that HR Wine Bar does follow a wine tasting for our format. So we start with, taking a look at it. We wanna look at the wine, check its legs. So what that means for the conversation is we're going to just talk about what's happening right now in organizations. And kind of what I'm seeing from my seat is the tension that Jen described a little bit ago, shifting expectations around flexibility and where we're working and transparency and feedback and how all of that works itself out in the workplace, and the friction that it's causing um, generationally. But I also feel like there's an overuse of labels when it comes to having these conversations, right? It's a knowing nod you're giving for our listeners right now, and confusion about what good looks like, right?
Mhm.
And how we handle these situations. And so um, what can you tell me about what you're seeing about how organizations are observing, how they're labeling these differences, which ones are accurate, where they may be oversimplified? What's happening in the space right now that you're seeing?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that when we have a tendency to want to label something, we're wanting to put some control on it so that we can predict the future and understand where we came from. So sometimes the labels help us feel a little more secure in our space. It also limits us in sometimes our solutions or thinking through things. So sometimes labeling can really just take us off the rails, and it allows us to be able to put all of our assumptions into that label. So if any of us are in a leadership role and we have a tendency to want to label someone else, that's usually an indication for us as a leader to step back and say, "Ooh, where's my DNA on that? And why is it important for me to label that piece?" So
Yeah, so fair, and the words I wrote down were, when we feel the need to control and predict, the security that we're feeling in that is limiting, and I'm just thinking about how often, especially in the last 5 years when so much of our work is unprecedented and we're in so much change and so much volatility, especially in the HR space with employment laws and all the other things, we kind of cling to these things because they are secure, right? If I can slap a label on that and put it in a file folder, thank you.
yes.
It's human nature to do that, and I will call myself out on it a little bit. um, what do you think the conversation is among, we're sitting in the leadership space. What do you think the
Mhm.
conversation is among the workforce, and how are they reacting to these labels? Are they embracing them? Are they saying, "Hard pass, you can't label me that way," or what does that look like?
So I do think that we each like to be special and individual, and so none of us at any age want to be labeled. It is a human tendency. Even as we were beginning the conversation, Amy and I were able to chat about we've entered kind of some new decades in our life, and so what does retirement in the future or family vacations look like at this stage of life, or partnering or parenting or things like that. And so, we try to find those commonalities, and sometimes age is the way to do that. And when someone makes assumptions about me, I'm going to bristle at that. And so that's going to be true for any age, whether I am 23 years old and starting in the job space, or I've been at my job for 20, 25 years. We all want to be known for ourselves and not for the assumption that people bring to us about us.
I'm
Um, oh, go ahead.
That's fantastic. I was just gonna say one of the things that I say with humor, and we just discussed that I turned 50 last year, and I call that embracing my crone era because I want to bring humor to the conversation. I'm firmly Gen X, right? And I can be forgotten and it's totally fine. But there are assumptions about that. I being Gen X and the label, some of them I don't like. The other thing I was thinking of is how often I have had managers or employees come to me and express their frustration about, someone who's working for them or with them in terms of generations and, "These kids today," and and my resistance to letting them go down that path of labels that the behavior that they don't like is automatically assigned to a generational difference, and I always stop them and I say, "Look, there are awesome people in every generation. There are horrible people in every generation. This doesn't have anything to do with that. And maybe there's something you can learn from this person because of their generation or just because of who they are that they bring to the table that you're not recognizing as a benefit." But how often we just slip right to that as a moniker or a way um, to label a behavior.
Yeah. And I think that,
Mhm.
it's a little bit different when we're talking about interpersonal, kind of like that small one-on-one micro interaction that we have and how we can be successful. But then also as a system, as a business, as a department, as a team, what are those considerations as to how we can be successful? So, like interpersonally, we know that the best thing to do is assume the positive. So, if I have a tendency to want to think about generational differences as maybe being my rationale for the friction that I have in front of me. I might also need to also just embrace the assumption of the other generational differences that could be really lovely. Um, or just put the generation label to the side. And, because not every Gen Z loves technology. They're not all flexible. They're not all, on TikTok. And so some of these assumptions that we have are not accurate. The phrase though that has always been there, whether it's the 80s, 90s, today, we've got, these younger folks haven't put the time in. They just want a promotion without being able to have known what we do here and how we do it. That was said back in the 90s when I started in my spaces, and it's said today for our young adults in our family who are out in the workforce right now.
Yep.
And so, uh, and all of that to say, I do want to acknowledge that the differences do exist between people, and generations do influence some of those differences. They are not the only or lead difference in that space. There's quite a bit of neuroscience to be able to remind us that adolescence, the onset of adolescence, is happening at a different stage than it was back when I was an adolescent. So if adolescence is delayed, that is also altering what that experience of adolescence is. We know that there's data out there that says Generation Z typically is showing more conservative spending. They're more pragmatic. They are concerned about housing and their future. And so, in some ways, that wisdom that I don't remember having at that age gives me hope for the future. And so, those are some things that we can keep in mind on that interpersonal piece that we're having with an individual, and on a systems piece. I'm thinking through that coworker that might just be like, well, this is because this colleague is from this generation and that's why it's not going well. From a systems piece, I'm wondering, we've always talked about culture, the norms, the climate. This is the way we do things. These are our mores in this space. And so how is it that we can help onboard into that space and have enough margin in the culture to allow innovation in new ways of considering what that culture can grow into. So space for individuals to be individuals, and it's okay to have standards and consistency to say this is how we do it here, and that systems approach.
All right, and that wraps our episode. No. I mean, that's pretty much it. That was a fantastic summation that we'll have you give again at the end of our podcast. But for now, we're gonna go into the second part of our tasting, which is swirling it around. So Jen's going to take us forward and ask a few more questions to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about like the last 5 to 10 years, do you see specific expectations that have really shifted in that time period?
So I think that what influences my perspective of this a little bit is that we get to see in our program graduate students who are taking some of their first graduate classes, which often corresponds to the beginning of their career. And we also see students in our program who are taking a more advanced, like a doctorate, and that is like kind of mid-career. And so the difference that I see might also be equated to the time in the profession. But when we are coaching up a student who's coming into graduate school at the beginning, we are expecting some developmental milestones in that experience. There are certain times and pieces where we help them go from transactional thinking to transformational thinking. And I don't see that as much in the doc students, which I think is also just a level of sophistication in their academic thinking, but probably time on the job, maturation, the whole 9 yards. And so my answer would be that I think a change in the last 5 years is from my seat, I've seen a little more transactional, original thinking instead of I can change the world by what I'm doing in my job, you know? And so that transactional thinking might sound like, how do I do this? And what does the target look like? And how will I know that I've hit the target? That's a very nice linear path. And that just probably doesn't happen in real life too often. And so being able to kind of alter that nice straight arrow and be comfortable in the gray and the mushiness of it all and understanding that it's all going to be part of the journey.
I think you have pretty much hit the nail on the head with what we in HR are thinking about in terms of succession planning and moving folks from general workforce into supervisory, into managerial, into director level. It's the same trajectory as going through this graduate progression, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I know as a faculty, we had to sit back and say, okay, if we know we want them to hit these milestones, if we want them to get to the point where it's no longer them as leaders, it's us as leaders, and some of these other kind of key moments, how are we front loading that so that they are navigating through the discomfort and have an opportunity for success and solution? You've got to kind of build in some of those success points to be able to maintain that momentum. Back in the classroom teaching days. Yeah.
I think you're talking about the zone of proximal development
Yes,
right
we
now.
are. Thank you, Vygotsky. Yes.
Yep, I can speak the Ed.D lingo. Yes, I can.
Oh, someone paid attention in Ed Psych 101. Well done.
Right, right.
Well done. Sorry,
And
Jen,
Amy,
I interrupted, so I'm gonna let you continue.
you're great. Amy gave a good overview too of like what some of HR's expectations and that we're very big picture and like kind of succession planning focused. Do you see any misalignment between HR and leadership on those expectations?
From my experience, no. When I think of, setting the tone and space and culture and setting up the systems that everyone gets to hook into. HR is at the table. HR is influencing that. There are some positions in an organization that have a really nice wide view. HR is one of those unique seats that has that wide view. Honestly, your communications director also has that wide view, and probably your data and performance administrator has that wide view too, because it's they get to see everything from left to right, and so in that beautiful position of HR, you get to see the system and the bench that's being developed, and the pathways that do or don't exist for people to be able to find their space and their place.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. What about consistency amongst managers and if they perceive in different ways?
Well, I don't know if there's a question behind the question, so I might be making an assumption here. But sometimes, just like we want a person in their first 5 years of employment to feel like they get to be themselves, we want managers to get to be themselves as well. And so, people are going to lead from their strengths, and that's what we want. We want them to lean into those natural talents that they have. And if there are um, disruptive or unhelpful behaviors of a leader, then they can work on that. They can learn new skills. But if it's not disruptive or unhelpful, it is kind of fun to get to be yourself in that leadership and bring whatever that style is and expectation. Now, if there's differences between leaders on black and white, like tight parameters that this is the way we do things in our culture here, then that probably needs to be readjusted because a tight parameter is something that everyone agrees to. But those loose parameters, you get there however you want, and be who you are in the process of getting to the end.
Yeah. I love the conversation around those parameters, and I'm just gonna take it a step further. Jen works in the healthcare space. Right? So tight parameters very often need to be tight parameters for a reason, whereas I work in a very creative, theatrical type of space, and it can be a little bit of a free for all trying to wrangle folks in, and there's a lot of personality going on. So making sure that you're, culturally aware and industry aligned, I think is important in that conversation as well.
Yeah, the mental model that just came to mind is just kind of like one big cloud over in Amy's space, and then like a really just nice flow chart over in Jen's space. You know, we want those medical systems to just be exactly how they should be. So, yes, thanks for keeping it between the ditches for us.
Yeah, exactly, and transitioning folks to, in the creative space to align toward process, consistent process, and throughput on a timeline, that can be a struggle sometimes too.
Yep, for sure, for sure. Yep.
Jen, do you have anything more for Tami?
Think I have any other questions. No, I was primarily concerned if that, inconsistency between managers like creates different experiences, but it seems like even with the differences that it's still positive across the board in your experience.
The reason I ask is because I'm gonna take a little bit of a left turn and go off script a little bit. Tami, you mentioned specifically playing to strengths, and I'm wondering if you have a favored strength aptitude test or assessment that you like. We're in Omaha, so
Yeah.
Gallup and Clifton Strengths is a big deal. DISC, they're just go down the list of all of the different
Yep.
strengths
Well,
tools that we
I
have out
do
there.
love like whenever a person, like as an adult, when we get to enter the workforce, we finally get to stop being a student that churns out homework and the homework we do gets to benefit us on the workspace, right? And so like any time that we can help our adult colleagues know more about themselves so that they get to be their best person like at home, in the community, at the job. This is good stuff that happens. Being from Omaha, like my original and first learning was Gallup, and we know that first learning is the strongest learning. So I'm a real strong advocate of leading with strengths. And whether it's DISC or emergenetics or we partner, our department partners with university does with a Human X for a summit at the end of June every year over at Baxter. We get like 1,000 people, and it's beautiful. It's all around leadership development, team culture, talent, and so they have what's called Leader 12, and that's another great inventory and a great resource. So I think anytime that we get to focus on you, to steal a Gallup term, that helps us do our best work.
Yeah. Excellent. I am also a StrengthsFinder fan.
Yep.
And I think that piece of it and the metacognition and the reflection piece of that is integral to the transformation trajectory that you were talking about earlier. Moving from transactional requires you to go inward a whole lot and investigate who you are, the person, and what you're bringing to the world before you can move into that transformational space. So,
And
yeah.
that transformational space is done conversation by conversation. And that doesn't come naturally to everyone. So sometimes, I think I can make this assumption. You tell me if I'm correct or not. In HR, you're good at conversation. You know how to sit down and like start and navigate through and coach someone up. And these are just talents that you bring into a space. Not everyone has that talent. And so it is okay to teach up some of those conversations. A resource that we like to use is Susan Scott's Fierce Conversations, and there's a Fierce Leadership book as well. Fierce not as a negative piece, but as an ownership piece, as I have the ability to make the space what I want and need, and to do that, I'm going to engage with the people near me, and here are the ways that I can have that conversation and dialogue. And so that is also as equally important around the self-knowledge. It's also like training up some of those skills that we know are going to make work go well for all of us in the space, like conversation.
I love that you give us all this credit, Tami, that it's a talent. I don't know, Jen, I'm gonna press on you and ask you, do you feel like this one-on-one conversation by conversation is an innate talent, or do you feel like you really had to work at it to get good at it?
I feel like I get better at it all the time. Like each experience makes me better. Like we talk about this a lot, Amy, but it's like just when you think that you've encountered every situation in HR, you encounter something new and you're like, well, now I will learn about how to handle this. So I'm glad it seems that way. But yeah,
I
always learning for
I
us.
I am also very glad that we're coming off that way. I feel like, yes, Jen, every conversation leads to better understanding of people, a better understanding of the need to kind of plan out the salient points and to plan for alternative futures, right? If this conversation goes this way, decision tree, now we're over here. I think that is a skill that is honed over time. But I think the talent piece maybe isn't so much talent as curiosity about what makes people tick and about how the system is affecting people and how that cycle keeps coming back. I could
I
be
think
wrong.
it's
That's only my take on it, but it's not an innate skill. It's one that I really had to develop over time. So,
Yeah, and leading with empathy, I think, is a trait that so many HR practitioners have, and that makes you, try to ask the questions to find out and kind of naturally engage in that conversation.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's why many of us get pulled into HR that didn't go get a degree in HR, right? So, Tammy, I interrupted. Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say yes, 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 and like that everything that you are easily talking about reminds us that it's interpersonal over compliance. All of us are in people, we're in the people business. our jobs are dependent on who we work next with. And, so even if you looked at it from a transactional side, human resources, the people, that is our most expensive asset in almost every budget for a company. And so we've got to do that well. And being able to have the talent um, from the HR seat to know what the path A, B, C, and D can be, depending on how the conversation goes. That systems thinking is an exceptional skill to keep honing in and so required and necessary. And to be quite honest, when I'm even looking at a new professional coming in, helping them see that systems thinking also so that they understand how they fit into the whole. That context really helps people feel secure and so that they feel that they can exist beyond their current space.
And now we're back to metacognition and
There you
reflection,
go.
right? See, it's all a cycle. On that note, friends, we're going to take just a quick pause. This is a reminder that our sponsors are the reason that we're able to bring you this content for free. So please, rather than fast forwarding, just let it breathe.
My Staff connects the right people and the right companies, fast, friendly, and focused on results. From temporary staffing to executive recruitment, the My Staff team knows Nebraska business and delivers a job done right. Looking for your next HR role in Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado, or South Dakota? Everyone knows Kim Lynch at My Staff because she connects great people with great careers. Let Kim help you land your next HR dream job. Email Kim at mystaff.com. Whatever your hiring need or career move, My Staff is your employment partner for a job done right. Visit mystaff.com or call 402-614-1441. Because at My Staff, we're not just recruiters, we're partners in your success story.
Thinking about self funded health insurance?
Every HR department must go through the process at some point. You're sitting there with 25, 50, maybe 100 employees, staring at a renewal notice of 15%, wondering how you can better control your program.
Ellerbrock Norris is there to help. If you're in a fully insured or level funded plan today, it may be time to look at self funded options. The team at Ellerbrock can walk you through how to contain any unexpected costs, how to gain better control of your pricing, and how to reinvest those savings back into your plan to ultimately take care of your people.
Set up your free benefits consultation at ellerbrock-norris.com today to better protect your purpose. Welcome back to our conversation with Tami Williams from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. We're talking today about differences in generations, but more importantly, how we're organizing the systems to meet the needs of all of our employees in those spaces and maybe turning the conversation away from labels and moving into a better understanding of each other and how the generations inform who we are rather than comprise everything about who we are. So, Tami, this is what we call our sniff test. So we've taken a look and we've swirled it around, and now we're going to sniff test. And these are scenarios that are proposed by AI. So any similarities to real situations are meant to protect the innocent or the guilty, as it were. And so we'd like to propose a couple scenarios and just get your take on them. So let's say an employee is used to receiving regular feedback, but the organization is still operating on kind of an annual review cycle. Nothing's ever really written down except on that annual basis. How does that affect people from a generational sense, and what part of that is just who people are and has nothing to do with generation?
Yeah, that reminds me of that phrase, relationship over compliance. So if the system is organized over an annual review process, it's going to be important that everyone understands what the stakes are for that annual review, and what it means. But then put that in perspective that we all know that we grow and develop every day, not once a year. And so I can envision that coaching conversation between a manager and an employee to sound like, this is how the annual review is used. These are the important pieces. Let's talk about what daily success looks like for you. What does a good day at the office look and feel like? What does a good day on the medical floor look like and feel like? And how will you know that you're doing a good job? And how will I know that you're doing a good job? Because sometimes we do need to help all of our team take responsibility for that internal locus of control, right? The employee gets to help influence that they are making progress in their job. It is not always waiting to be told. So some of that is maturation. But some of it is just who a person is naturally wired as. And so we'll meet them where they are. I look at our two young adults in our family and out in the workforce. They come from school where they're used to getting a grade, getting feedback. In their learning management system, they immediately know what their grade was and what their score was. And so for our two, I know that that external grade helped them know if they were good or not. Well, that's not how work life is. We don't grade your Wednesday compared to your Thursday and make a chart, you know. So
Gold star.
yeah, exactly. And so, just helping that natural release of responsibility, that gradual release of responsibility to be able to move from an external feedback to the internal feedback. And as we help our employees do that, they're also owning their success. They are owning the leadership from the seat that they're in. So I think that coaching up and having them define success, having them help identify how they will keep their manager informed of success, puts the onus on them and helps them develop as a colleague.
I love everything about that answer, and I have, like, a running list of responses that I now am gonna have to, like, simplify. First of all, your your answer of, well, if it's an annual system, let's just change the system individually in that one-on-one conversation. And I've never heard a more Gen X thing to say. Like, I don't like your rules.
So let's remake them.
Remake them. But I love the release of responsibilities piece, because one of the things, having, being a recovering educator, that I've had to get managers to understand is that when I went to school, we sat in rows, we did our worksheet, we handed it to the person behind us, and they had a red pencil, which was, and they marked it up and knew your grade. And they handed it back to you, and then the teacher, all they had to do was enter it by hand into a grade book, right? Which you never saw.
Yep.
Until the end. And if you wanted to know your grade for the end of the semester, you had to calculate that yourself. And how much of the immediate access to that information is affecting people coming out of school. And then telling our managers, who are of an age usually like myself, now kids are going to school and they're going to English class at Hogwarts. They're the couch and, like, low lighting, and they sit in pods and they do group work, and they have differentiated learning and get to choose how they demonstrate their knowledge of a topic, and they get a rubric. This is what done looks like. And if you do this, you get a 5. And if you don't do this, you get a 4, and then a 3 and a 2 in multiple domains. Right. And so they know what done looks like from the start before they even begin planning their project. And they can decide, well, I don't want to work this hard. A C is fine for me. So I'll work this hard.
Yep.
Right. And so what I'm trying to communicate to my managers is the onus is on us to do better at the system, to show them where the target is, to show them that there are lots of different ways to get there that are individualized to their learning, but we're not going to set up the individualized piece. We're going to there's the target. Go get it. I hired you to go get it. I have my own target I need to go get. And then the number of times we in management will move a target on employees without telling them. We just shift it. And they're like, but I've been doing this all this time. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. That's not a goal anymore. Right?
Great.
And then we chalk up these kids today. Right?
the onus has to be on these kids then, right? So as a manager, I have to let that employee know, okay, so this is the target. You're going to be the one to get there. It is a paradigm shift because no longer is someone providing you the pathway or the rubric or formative checks along the way. So how are you going to set yourself up for success? And how are you going to make sure that I know you're being successful? They get to learn how to advocate for themselves in that process, and we can support that. We can coach that up. That's part of a new employee process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that there's definitely no formative assessment going on in that annual review.
No.
So we can have a whole other conversation about how I think annual reviews are garbage and we should do away with them altogether, but that might break the whole profession and maybe I shouldn't go there. So I think Jen has another scenario for you.
Yeah, and Amy, you made me think of something that my manager says quite a bit, and this is not a generational statement, but that we're just living in a time where we kind of like have a Burger King and Amazon mentality, right? So like we want things to be our way, but then we also want things immediately. Like we want to be able to get it quickly, like we get our stuff from Amazon, and like how you were describing that really made me think about that.
Yeah.
Um, so all right.
Yesterday we had, just gonna take a sidebar, we were at the Total Rewards Summit for HRAM yesterday, which is our comp and benefits all-day, program, and Scott Kaywood from World at Work, who will be a guest on later this fall, he was talking about our impatience and how even the Amazon mentality has gotten accelerated to the point that, "What do you mean I have to wait till tomorrow? I should have it by 5 o'clock." Because now you can get it same day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but even the impact on HR, where it's like, I need the answer immediately. And sometimes takes us a while to formulate.
Like, I don't have the answer at hand. I have to go get that information from someone else. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you illuminate though a really nice thing that I don't know has been always part of an intentional culture conversation, but really this is a huge piece of establishing what is our culture. We can talk about things like turning email off after this much time and then turning it on in the morning at this time and those types of things, but this idea of instant answers and all of that, that really is that systems culture piece. And how do we want what do we want to be known for in that workspace? And sometimes maybe we do want to be known for instant and immediate and have it your way and all of those things. So just whatever it is, be willing to live with the consequences.
sorry, I just have to ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I know. There you go.
There
Very
Equal
nice,
reading.
Amy. Okay, so yes, I did have one other scenario. So, what if you have a team and they're kind of struggling with expectations or preferences across different roles and different levels, whether that's due to different managers or whether that's due to job descriptions and metrics or whatever that's due to. Where do you think that the clarity should come from in those circumstances to kind of align across teams?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole for just a moment. So if you'll let me kind of rest in my area of comfort, which is like being a school administrator in a classroom, we throw this scenario out to our students that say, okay, you've got two seventh grade math teachers and they grade differently. And then you've got a family who has a student in both, they've got twins and one seventh grader is on one, one's the other. The two teams grade differently and the parent feels confused and caught in the middle and da 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 da. The conversation that usually comes from that is a conversation that is often summarized between the tension of consistency and innovation. And so, we need differences. We need things to be unique in a certain space because that's how we grow as an organization. We do things creatively. This is where we get to bust through new ideas and become become known in the space that we're working in. Um, and so, but we also have consistency. And so when is that consistency important? We can go back and use that phrase of tight and loose parameters, but because my context comes from education, I think I probably err on the side of let's support that innovation, because that's usually where the best growth, the next things happen, and reserve our consistency for when it is critical, compliance, legal, like the things that we really must be just lockstep about. The things that are definable, that impact the bottom line, the measurable pieces. That's where those consistencies have to be. And so as a manager of managers, if I've got those middle managers who are being inconsistent on the compliance pieces, that's a corrective conversation. If I have middle managers who are being inconsistent in ways that allow for innovation, um, I'm having a coaching conversation about being on the lookout for things that can get us in trouble.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Tammy, this takes us into the hot seat. So this is section 4, which we call SIP, and it's just little snippets, which I will say, as an HR person who likes the written and spoken word and can be pretty verbose, this is hard for me. But we're looking for the short answer, the SIP, and so we have a number of prompts that we're going to ask you to fill in, kind of rapid fire. And we find that the less time you have to think about it, the more true the answer is, maybe?
Okay. All right, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. So, Tammy, the most overused generational assumption is?
That Gen X is stuck in their way, Gen Z are the innovators and tech savvy.
I know a boomer who is more tech savvy than any Gen Zer I know. What employees are actually asking for is?
To be seen.
What managers are struggling with is?
Tension between compliance and relationship.
One thing organizations are getting wrong is?
Um, Not focusing on culture. Culture eats strategy every day. And I'm sorry, author, I don't remember who wrote that book, but um, that's how we get things done.
I feel like that's a Drucker quote. I could be
Yes,
wrong.
thank you. That is
Yep,
it.
yep.
Yes.
Okay. One shift leaders need to make is?
Slow down and focus on the person. We are in the people business.
Mhm. What this conversation is really about is?
Interpersonal.
What gets labeled as generational but isn't?
My uniqueness.
Where expectations break down most often is?
Un- Unclear end target. Um,
Okay. The biggest gap between leaders and employees is?
shared understanding of how the individual can contribute to the end goal.
The hardest thing for managers to navigate right now is?
Honestly, I think it's probably figuring out how to know the individual and keeping within some boundaries.
100%. I vote for that.
Mm.
One thing that would reduce friction immediately is?
Assume the positive and know your colleagues' strengths.
Fantastic. Look how good you are at this game. Wow, quick on the draw. Yes, absolutely. For our listeners that don't have video, we're doing a victory rah-rah going on here. So Jen's going to take us into our savor section, which will round us out to our toast.
Yes. So the majority of folks think that HR is black and white when it's really lots of shades of gray. So for HR Wine Bar, we connect this to a wine flight going from sweet to dry. So on the sweet side of our conversation that we've been having today, we have maybe managers that are a little bit less consistent, pretty variable. They're giving unclear expectations, maybe reactive. They do some generational labeling, right? Over on that side. And then over on the dry side, we have very rigid, clear expectations, consistent leadership behavior, defined communication, system driven processes, right? Focus on the strategy, but maybe less person focused, right? And then kind of in the middle is where we find that sweet spot of like the defined expectations, but the balancing between, like you had said, with the kind of the consistency and the innovation, right? Kind of like trying to align as much as possible. So, how do we kind of move the needle between our different wines across the flight?
Well, I think it's always good to know the people in front of you. And part of their story gets to be all aspects of their identity, which includes the generation that they are and the way that they're choosing to define those strengths and talents that they bring into it. And as an organization, we get to have some tight, loose parameters where we know that we want to set people up for success. And these are the milestones that we want to help them hit.
Wonderful. Amy, you want me to move on to the reflection?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think we've really hit on a lot of great conversation around generations and not defining generations by the typical stereotypes, right? And also discussed that really providing clarity and communication are what shape the outcomes more than perhaps the gaps or the differences between the generations. And also really highlighted the importance of coaching up and that relationship over compliance, which I love that piece, Tami. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else to add, Amy, from your reflection?
I don't know. I have like 17 Post-it notes here. Like great big Post-it notes. I'm kind of lit up about this. As a person, Tami, who also has two Gen Zers in my house, and recently one in college and one recently graduated from high school. I'm just really excited for the world that they're moving into. And as I, look at the dashboard on my HRIS, right, I have one boomer, and I'm watching this shift generationally because my HRS does track generational and they label us, right? And I'm watching these things kind of shift around, and I'm seeing that Gen Z in my organization is already 30% of my organization. And so I'm looking for what's going to happen with Gen Alpha, which out on social media is called the honey badgers. Like they do not care. So
As
I'm
a parent of two Gen Alphas, agreed.
agreed. Yeah, they're just like, I'm not going to call them holy terrors, but they're righteous terrors. Like they're suffering no fools, and they will tear down the world to do what's right. And I just love watching, that progression come through. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation again. I mean, I'll be retired by then, but to have this conversation again in 15, 20 years, I would just be really curious to be a fly on the wall for that conversation later. I hope to be in Italy, but, So all of that to say, Tami, any final thoughts that we haven't touched on today that you think would best prepare all of us for your chat with us when you come to meet us in person in September? Is there anything you want us to prep before we come, or things to think about? Let's get into that Bloom's taxonomy or metacognition or something like that to prep for that lesson.
I love it. You give an educator the opportunity to give homework. I am all over that. So what I would love for a homework assignment is actually just like Webb's Depth of Knowledge 1, identify kind of the bottom of the Bloom's taxonomy. When you look at your system in front of you, identify what are those markers of success that you often see through the arc of employment. And so, are there times when you see a new employee coming in and there's this thing that occurs that means, oh, we all understand our culture now because this is what we're seeing. So if we can all kind of spend some time really, really analyzing what are those markers of success. So I call them developmental milestones in your space. I think that will help move our conversation in September forward even more.
That is fantastic, and I've just identified based on that question that one of the reasons I love where I work with all these creative people is one of the signs for me in my workplace is that every single person I work with has something they do outside of work.
Yeah.
They paint, they dance, they sing, they collect things, they work on cars, they ride motorcycles. They all have a hobby and something that lights them up from the inside that I can't teach or coach, right? And they're invested in something that lights them up, which then just makes them more fun to be around, makes them bring more creativity to the workplace, and just makes the workplace more fun to be. And that, for me, is a marker that I've already identified. So I'm going to call you privately for homework number 2. We'll just move up the Bloom scale there.
That's awesome. Perfect.
And I know we talked about Gallup earlier, and 2 of my top strengths are learner and developer. So I'm thrilled to have homework for the upcoming session.
Perfect.
I love that.
And I'll be thrilled to grade it. There you go. Yeah.
With your red pencil.
Pass it back.
Pass it back. Yep, I love that. Fantastic. Well, Tami, thank you so much. We're eternally grateful for the time we spent together and so excited to see you in person in September. We're thankful to the Human Resource Association of the Midlands for supporting us in HR Wine Bar, as well as our sponsors, My Staff and Ellerbrock Norris Insurance. We want to close today with our toast. So, to understanding the systems before we label the people.
And to leading with clarity instead of assumption.
Cheers to HR.
Cheers to HR.
Cheers to HR.
My Staff connects the right people and the right companies. Fast, friendly, and focused on results. From temporary staffing to executive recruitment, the My Staff team knows Nebraska business and delivers a job done right. Are you dreading leadership retirements in the next year or so? Don't scramble. Plan ahead with Brad Jones and My Staff. They've helped dozens of companies find C-suite successors who lead with confidence. Visit mystaff.com to power your next leadership hire. Whatever your hiring need or career move, My Staff is your employment partner for a job done right. Visit mystaff.com or call 402-614-1441. Because at My Staff, we're not just recruiters, we're partners in your success story.
Does this sound familiar? You get your annual renewal notice and see your premiums rising every single year. But what are you going to do? If you get quotes from other carriers, you face an uphill battle. More and more change for your people year over year.
Benefits shouldn't be a once-a-year scramble. Ellerbrock Norris helps you think long-term. Long-term planning for your benefits package, long-term planning around employer retention, long-term planning around key people, and long-term planning built for cost savings.
Ellerbrock Norris is here to help you build a plan that's better for the bottom line and better for the people it's protecting.
Get your free benefits consultation today at ellerbrock-norris.com.